Hi everyone, my name is Zahara and I'm really pleased to bring you this webinar on brave conversations in the classroom. I really hope you find it of use for having brave and uncomfortable conversations and developing great relationships with all of your students in your classrooms. Thanks very much. Hi everyone, my name is Zahara and I am a DEI lead, previously an English teacher and head of English and associate senior leader, and I now work within education and with schools on navigating diversity, equality, equity, inclusion and belonging in schools for staff and students. I'm here today to talk to you about how we can have brave conversations in the classroom, what they are, and to offer practical strategies, tips and tools to reassure teachers and to also give you the confidence to be able to have brave conversations and remove the fear that some of us have when talking about diversity, equality and inclusion, especially when we're in a world which is so heavily dominated by social media, by call out and cancel culture, that can really take out the human from conversation and scare us into not talking to one another. So I really hope that, over the next 30 minutes or so, I can reassure you and give you the tools and practical strategies to be able to have brave conversations to overcome bias and navigate many issues around diversity, equality and inclusion in your classrooms with your students, but also with your colleagues too. So a huge part of conversation are our words and the language that we use. And I'm sure many of us heard this phrase when we were younger: sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never break me, or names will never hurt me. And I don't think this could be any further from the truth. Okay, literally, maybe. However, figuratively, we know that the language that we use has an intrinsic impact on our well-being, on our teachers' well-being as well as student well-being. Hence, it's really important that when we're having conversations with students, we're very mindful about the type of language we're using. And it's really important that we ensure that the language that we use isn't tinged by bias, stereotypes, or negativity that can cause young people to have limited beliefs. There is plenty of research out there, and some research done by the Runnymede Trust and Young Minds and several other organisations, which tell us about the impact of bias, racism, prejudice, discrimination, which all comes through, much of it, comes through words and the language that we use, and it has a huge impact, a negative impact on a student's sense of belonging, their presence in school, so their attendance, their attainment and achievement, as well as their relationships in schools. Often it can leave students with marginalised identities feeling isolated, feeling lonely, feeling that their achievement is capped, and that they can't achieve as well as their white peers or their neuronormative peers, which, although an uncomfortable truth or belief, it's something that we can overcome and navigate through having brave conversations. To do this, we need to really celebrate diversity and create equitable opportunities for our students and for our staff too. And the first thing we must do is to create space to confront our own biases. And this can be done in a group setting, but it can also be done by ourselves. So if it's something that really does make you feel uncomfortable, because it is uncomfortable to accept and to understand that we all have biases, we are all affected by stereotypes. It's something you can also do by yourself. To just reflect and think about the biases we have and the language we use that could have an impact on the well-being of others, especially those with marginalised identities around us. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about the halo effect, because the halo effect is, in other words, it is, I guess we could say that it is another word for negative stereotypes, and it is something that can have an impact on our conversations, our perception, perceptions and our understanding of the people around us. So the halo effect is the research founded by, or the term was founded by psychologist Edward Thorndike, and it is effectively our tendency. So it does refer to the religious symbol of the halo, but it's our tendency to allow a specific trait to influence our overall impression of a person, a company, a group of people, a product, and it affects our judgment of them. So, for example, now with the word halo having positive connotations, what it could mean is that what we perceive to be good looking, or someone we perceive to be good looking or handsome or tall, let's use the stereotype tall, dark, and handsome. The halo effect would imply that we automatically assume that that person might be intelligent, or would be a good person, or would be well behaved, whatever that might mean in our minds. And as much as over the years we disrupt that, the halo effect does have a major impact on our perceptions of our students, of the conversations we have in classrooms, and of how we navigate brave conversations. So it can really help to confront our own biases associated with marginalised identities, because the opposite of the halo effect is sometimes called a horn effect. So what that means is that if there are stereotyped traits of people or products or environments that have negative characteristics, they can also lead to an overarching negative impression of a person, a product, or a group of people. So again, an example I use are hoodies. So hoodies have, for many years, even from when I was very young, had negative connotations attached to them, that if you are wearing a hoodie, you're almost criminalized. So what that can do is, when we're thinking of the horn effect and the stereotypes associated with that, if we see someone wearing a hoodie or a group of people wearing a hoodie, automatically, and it is, I should emphasize, it is unconscious in many respects, automatically our minds, or we think negative of that group of people, of that person, or of that or of the environment they are within. So it can really help to spend some time thinking and reading a little bit further about the halo effect and the horn effect, and also confronting our own biases that we might hold of particular groups of people, of particular environments, because that can then, if we pause and reflect on our own negative stereotypes and our own biases, we are automatically more conscious when we go into brave conversations to listen, to talk without judgment, and to hopefully create the safe spaces that our students need for us to be able to talk about difficult topics and conversations with them. The reason I say this is because often our students might not feel they can have conversations in our classroom because of their perceived biases of us too. So it can really help to confront our biases and to talk to them quite openly and candidly about the fact that your classrooms are safe spaces, you are all learning together, and you are there to overcome negative stereotypes, biases associated with our identities, in order to create kind and safe spaces for all students. So it can really, in terms of in our classrooms, you may be thinking, well, of course, it would be great to be able to create time and space for all of these conversations, but we have a curriculum to teach, there is marking to do, there are targets to meet, which is absolutely valid and very true. And one of the ways in the last few years that schools have been trying to tackle having brave conversations, as well as encouraging a positive outlook and teaching about diversity, is through our curriculum mapping, and to ensure that our curriculums are equal, equitable, inclusive, and create a culture of belonging for all. So just before we I go into this a little bit more, just I want to clarify my definitions of these 4 words, because they have become buzzwords. We do hear them quite a lot, and sometimes we can get a little bit lost within the definitions of what they are. So I've tried to summarize what each word is through what it might look like within the classroom. So equality is the objective. We want every student and every individual to have an equal opportunity to make the most of their lives and their talents. No one should have no one should have poorer or limiting life chances based on their circumstances, their birthplace, their location, their beliefs, or their identity. So that's what equality is, and we want everyone in our classrooms. The objective is that everybody has access to equal opportunities. How we achieve that then is through our actions, which is equity. Which means that each person, we know this, that every individual in our classroom has different circumstances, and we will ensure that we allocate the right resources and the opportunities they need to reach an equal outcome. So this might, I guess, from a classroom perspective, this might be access to a diverse range of resources, differentiation, different types of conversation, different interventions needed for different students. And the impact of this is that every child and every student in our classrooms feel that they are included. They have access to the opportunities and resources for everyone. We will make reasonable adjustments for them to ensure that they feel included in our classrooms, and therefore that they belong in our schools, which means that every individual, every student, every member of staff feels valued, respected, and confident within their identity. It means that they are able to be their authentic selves safely and securely. They are able to talk and have conversations with us without the fear of bias, without the fear of being stereotyped, and to be their authentic selves. So one of the key ways to create this culture of belonging is through our curriculum. And we want to make sure that within our curriculums, especially for Key Stage 3, I know that at Key Stage 4, of course, there are certain limitations based on the requirements of exam boards, etc., etc. But within the Key Stage 3 curriculum and lower down, Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 1, we can try to create a curriculum which is diverse so that all students feel seen, heard, understood, and represented. You know, that they know that their identities, who they are, is appreciated, that they matter, and that the curriculum content is accessible and tailored to the needs of all students. So it's really important that when you're looking at your curriculums and you are curriculum mapping, it can be a really helpful thing to do is to have the protected characteristics alongside your curriculum mapping, even there visibly in front of you, so that you are able to ensure that all of the content, the resources, effectively the story that your curriculum is telling is inclusive of all different identities. And one of the things I would encourage you to pause and do at this part of this video is to take one of your curriculum maps or a scheme of work and really have a think about what story that curriculum is telling. And it can really help to have this as a brave conversation with a member of your department or with a colleague. So looking at your curriculum map, thinking about what story is your curriculum telling? Who are the main characters? So who is it that your students are learning about? Are they learning about a dominant character? Are they not learning about a certain person? Is there is there a pattern to the minor characters? Is there a pattern to the major characters? Is it relatable for them? Now, I'm very aware that, and I know this has become a bit of a buzz term on social media, especially, of things being relatable and unrelatable. And of course, our students need to learn and understand things that they don't always find relatable. That is true. However, what we can do is ensure that within the threads of the curriculum that we are creating for them, there will be aspects of that curriculum or aspects of those lessons, aspects of the scheme of work that they can relate to. So it can really help thinking about the classes and the students that you're teaching. And what will they relate to? What will they value? What will have that make that difference to their learning and their understanding of equality, of global citizenship, of empathy, of the others around them? And the last thing that this can be quite an uncomfortable question, and something that I really encourage teachers to sit with, is, does it tell a story that your students need to listen to? So often we find now that because of social media, because of the resources that students have access to online, sometimes they are seeing or not seeing things that we need them to see. So, for example, when we want them to learn about race or and race equality, where are there, what stories are they listening to? Are they just learning about enslaved people? Are they just learning about and when I say that, are they learning about Black history with regards to just enslaved people? Are they learning about Black history before slavery? Are they learning about the world that we live in now, pre-colonial times? Are they learning about people who are neurodiverse in a positive way? Are they learning about a neurodiversity as being superpowers for young people as well? It's really important that you ask yourselves these questions, and even if you feel that you don't have the language for them, that's okay, because if you can sit with your department, sit with your colleagues and look at your curriculum and talk through these questions, you're already having a brave conversation, and you're already, even whether it be subconsciously or subliminally, taking on the language that you need to be able to then go teach and have these conversations in lessons. It can also help, after you've done this activity, to put this to a group of students or to a class that you have a positive relationship with and ask them for their opinion. Student voice matters, and it can really help if you have a brave conversation about student learning. And I've done this activity myself, and I found it really powerful to have these conversations with young people and to learn things about them that I just never knew. And it can be a really purposeful, enriching and valuable conversation to have. So if you can, at this stage, I would urge you to pause the video, pull out a curriculum map. You don't necessarily at this point have to spend any more than 5 minutes on it, and ask yourselves these questions about it. So what do brave conversations look like in the classroom? So when we're thinking about about diversity, brave conversations enable diversity of thought. It can be, as students, young people, and even us as adults, we can end up becoming very comfortable within our echo chambers. So if we're having conversations which purposefully look at diverse viewpoints, and we're encouraging students to ask the questions why and how, we are encouraging diversity of thought. It's also really important to remember that brave conversations enable empathy, compassion, and also healthy disagreement. So when we're starting to have brave conversations in our classrooms and we're talking about uncomfortable topics, whether they be about equality, whether they be about justice, or whether they just be about students' perceptions and things that they've seen online, it's really important that we remind them that we are coming at this from a position of empathy and from a position of compassion. You are there to create a space where students can have a healthy disagreement, can, if we think back to the halo effect, they need to talk through their views to almost think about which parts are valid, true for them, or empathetic or respectful and valuable, whilst also working through their views to understand which parts might be seen as disrespectful, which parts are potentially damaging when we're thinking of diversity, equality and inclusion, and creating that culture of belonging for all. So include a huge part of this is that it does create, if we're having these conversations within your classrooms, it does create safe and inclusive spaces. So a classroom is a space where you have built trusting relationships, you know these students, you are kind to them, you have developed respectful relationships with them, a culture of mutual respect. And just like we would when we're having discussions about Shakespeare or maths or exam criteria, everybody has an opportunity to be heard. And as much as there may be silence at the beginning of brave conversations, or people might not be wanting to have their opinion, if you really emphasize this culture of empathy, this culture of inclusion, a space where unkindness won't be tolerated, a space where students can feel like they belong and that their opinion can be discussed, even if they find that to be uncomfortable, we're creating that culture of inclusion. And therefore, it really helps to overcome bias and judgment. It helps to overcome the halo effect, bullying, and any miscommunication too. Because often what we find with young people is that they are having these conversations on social media, especially, and by when I say having the conversations, they're silently having these conversations on social media. They have information overload, they are scrolling, they are seeing, and they are then taking on this information. As much as we know that they are intelligent and they are able to potentially filter, it's something that they do need our support with. And there is research to suggest that developing talk and conversation in the classroom, not just about subject matter, but about difficult topics and topics that we don't always talk about, it can really help develop a culture of respect. It can really help ensure that as much as people might disagree with one another, they understand where each other are coming from. And as we know, during lockdown, when students weren't attending school, this was something that they didn't have the opportunity to do. So we have a whole generation of students that really need our active support in teaching those skills of conversation. So whether that be at the beginning of a lesson, whether it be in the middle or towards the end of a lesson, whether it be at form time, or where you actually create special lessons really to have these conversations with debating topics, with statements, or just linked to your curriculum content about the story your curriculum is telling, you are automatically having brave conversations with them. Now, you may be thinking it's all well and good me talking about having brave conversations, but sometimes it's still not as easy as to just have them using curriculum content. So I just want to show you one of the tools, one of the resources I highly recommend, which is called Big Talk, which was founded by a student at the time, now entrepreneur, called Kalina Silverman, who effectively was a student at university, felt quite lonely and isolated because all of the conversations she was having were linked to small talk, and she thought, well, why do we keep having small talk? Let's have big talk. So I'm just going to briefly show you part of the video.
Hi, I'm Kalina, and this is the beginning of an experiment called Big Talk. I wanted to be able to go out, meet new people, and instead of just make small talk, actually have deeper, meaningful conversations with them. Kalina.
Get your hand on TV.
Yeah, come on.
want to do before I die? Oh, man. Jeez. That's a deep question.
Oh, or what do I want to do when I grow up?
You mean job-wise?
That's a hard one.
Well, that's a tough one.
Is it just one thing?
Well,
I want to learn how to scuba dive.
Travel the Appalachian Trail.
Go to the priest and make a confession.
I'd like to be a herpetologist. Somebody who studies reptiles and amphibians.
see my kids graduate from college.
Make every moment count.
Live without any alcohol and drugs and problems, big problems like that, and just be happy day by day.
Being able to reconcile with my father and say I love you to him.
I want to have a wife and kids. I wrote like an essay on it when I was in 5th grade, and I remember all my friends made fun of me because everyone was like, I want to be a sports star or a movie star, but I just thought, wife and kids.
I'll be happy because I already lived, before I lived very bad. I was homeless for 13 years.
Maybe call a lot of my friends.
I'd probably text all my friends.
I would take a road trip to go see someone today. I can't say. I would tell them that I love them. Yeah,
Do they know you love them?
I think so.
What would I want to do today? If I was
Yeah.
to die tomorrow, if I knew I was going to die tomorrow. Be with my family.
If I knew I was gonna die tomorrow, I'd get on the airplane to go be with my son. You know, I'm like, it's literally, I'll say the most significant relationship that I have. Being 18 and having a baby.
If I were dying, I'd love to have Charlie on my bed. Ray was dying. He had this little fluffy dog that cuddled right next to him and would not. Oh, that's fascinating. It's a dog bark. Do you love that or what?
Be in denial, thinking it ain't gonna happen. And, I can't die.
My mom said that the day before she died that if she were to die tomorrow, she would have lived the fullest life ever. And then she died unexpectedly the next day. So this is a very personal question. So family's always been of utmost importance to me.
Then when I was about 50, I guess 50, I fell in love with a woman.
You know, my dad's black from the South. His father was murdered by the KKK when he was 5.
Like, I have 2 children that are 19 and 20 now. It just seems like just yesterday, like when they were little, the time goes by so fast. I don't even feel like I'm really any much older, than when they were kids. And
I love my life so much right now. I used to not like at all. I used to hate my life. There was this girl that I really liked, and I went up to her and basically told her that I liked her. She was like, "Oh, you're kidding, right?" And then I was like, "Oh, yeah."
I am really sinner.
Why do you think you're a sinner?
I am a human being.
I could at one point say I hated my father. If I had died without reconciling with my father, I think I would definitely would not be able to sleep at night. And I think being able to do that just has brought me a lot of freedom.
Family is everything. But everything else is meaningless.
People's relatives are their wealth. This is their true wealth. If you have a relative, you have to treasure them.
We have to respect the person in the world they have walked in, that they are, who they are.
Now, when you get who you are, you have the confidence and the power to do anything that you want.
I want y'all to understand this out there in TV world. You have to be 100% with yourself no matter what you do.
Walk by a stranger and never talk to them.
Yes.
The fact that you're coming and talking is nice.
So what I hope that video showed you is, as much as it's about big conversations, it showed you how having these brave conversations and talking about something like death is brave, and talking about grief is brave if we're thinking of the classroom situation. But Kalina's experiment and now business really, and movement, shows us that when we have conversations and deep conversations and brave conversations, we are able to connect with people very positively, form really healthy relationships, learn about them, things that we potentially wouldn't even think about. And hopefully you could see from her video, from the people that you saw, it can really help us out confront our own biases. Like the halo effect can also be applied to her video and about the people in the video too, and how having brave conversations and talking to people about difficult topics, and not if we reframe that, not difficult topics but topics we don't always talk about in the workplace or in the classroom, can really help form positive relationships. And help students especially practice listening with an open mind and in silence, and that is something that is a key skill. Part of having brave conversations is not just the talking. What's more important is the listening, and an activity like Big Talk can really help students practice the art of listening and be empathetic and compassionate and really understand the people around them, which can help overcome so much of the bias, so much of the negativity and the stereotypes that can often lead to bullying, miscommunication, and misinterpretations within schools and our classrooms. In order to make Big Talk, it can help to create a safe space with rules. So really, just like we would introduce any classroom, to really caveat the classroom space when you're having these conversations and these talks, so that people know that everybody deserves to be respected, everybody should be heard, and we are there to have mutually respectful, valuable conversations to learn about each other. So I highly recommend Big Talk to you and to your students. It is also a card game which can be found on the website makebigtalk.com. So when we're setting up our classrooms to have brave conversations, it can really help to flip the narrative. I think a lot of the time as teachers and as school staff, we spend a lot of time thinking about our students, but it's important that you ensure that you feel comfortable and safe too. So what questions do you have about a particular topic? If we are talking about diversity, equality, equity and inclusion, do you have questions about the Equality Act? Do you have questions about the protected characteristics? Do you have questions about the protected characteristic linked to a piece of curriculum content? And it can really help to answer those questions for yourself first and think about the support that you need, tap into the resources available at your school, to then go on to have the brave conversations in the classroom. Because often to have those brave conversations in the classroom, it's important that you feel empowered with the information that you need, and also empowered to tell your students that as much as you understand the topic, you are still learning. And if something is asked or said that you are unsure about, that you will go look it up later to bring to a discussion in a future lesson or on a future day. Equally, by flipping the narrative and empowering yourselves with that knowledge first before you empower your students, you will also be able to call out any kind of disrespect or offence that is, whether it be intentional or unintentionally, made in the classroom by students, because we all know those situations can happen, and one of the ways to combat that is to empower yourselves with the knowledge that you need first. It's really important to set rules as well. So thinking back to the halo effect and overcoming bias and Big Talk, you are there to withhold judgment, to listen to one another and to not interrupt. So you will be listening with empathy, with compassion to the lived experiences of others, to the views other people have, without unkindness or mockery. And it can really help to encourage students to think about their body language, their facial expressions, and when you are listening, you are listening without judgment. So students are there to listen to the other people and to think about their thought process, to think about where their views are coming from, to really appreciate how they have formulated the views that they have. And that can work both two ways, in that it works effectively two ways. It works for the person listening, that they have almost given themselves a break from judging, from their bias, and are almost investing completely in the person that they're listening to. And it can really help brave conversations and brave talk for the person that's talking, because they know that they are being listened to in a way that they won't be judged, that they can be their authentic selves, and that their views are being seen, heard, and appreciated. And lastly, this kind of all of these three skills work full circle in that it's really important to overcome internalization. So that links very heavily to listening, which is that, as I mentioned before about echo chambers, we can often get so caught up and comfortable within our echo chamber that if somebody mentions a perspective that is different, that we disagree with, we can automatically shut down. Our bias comes into play, our prejudice comes into play, or just the discomfort comes into play. And the word internalization can really help with students, where you are encouraging them not to internalize what they are listening to. Instead, you are encouraging them to listen with an open mind, to listen with kindness, to listen with respect. And that goes for the person talking too. They need to be aware that they are talking in a respectful way, that they are talking with an understanding that other people have different viewpoints, and therefore that the way that they communicate needs to be mindful, respectful, and appreciative of other people, and empathetic towards everybody that's around them too. So brave conversations is very much about talking with empathy, compassion, and really fueling listening skills. So really encouraging students to practice the art of listening, and that can help by ensuring that they don't interrupt, ensuring that they are investing fully in what they are hearing. And sometimes it can help for them to make notes whilst they're listening too, just so that they are focused on the viewpoints of other people, as opposed to listening with their own bias and their own judgment. Now, of course, as I say all of this, I'm very well aware of the classrooms that we that we have, and the students that we have in our classroom. And as much as I would like to say 7/8 or 90%, I don't know why I said 7/8, but 90% of our students are good, respectful. They want to create a culture of empathy and a culture of belonging for all. There are still students, and this is uncomfortable for any teacher and any school to talk about. There are still students who might intentionally cause hurt. There are still students who might intentionally be disrespectful, and that is also something that we need to bravely confront. It would be wrong of me to say that having a brave conversation can be covered in one lesson, and we can all leave feeling that we belong to every classroom, and we've created that perfect culture of equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I know that that's just not true. So when you're having these conversations, one of the things that teachers have said to me in the past is that the reason why they don't want to have them, or the reason why they sort of try to shut them down, is because of what's said back to them, and the offence and the prejudice really that is sometimes part of the comments and the conversations being had. So it can really help it is difficult to interrupt these views. You know that they are wrong, you know that they are disrespectful. So here are just a few phrases which you can use, which can really help navigate those conversations where students will know that you're approaching these discussions with empathy and curiosity. So you're not there just to shut down brave conversations. You are there to help we are all there to help students navigate uncomfortable and difficult topics with curiosity. So it might be, if somebody says something that's offensive or seems quite prejudiced or narrow, we might say, where does that thinking come from? I'm just curious, where did you hear that? Why do you think that? Which social media account was that on? Did you hear that at home? Was it? And it can, although that it's really important to ask that question from a safeguarding perspective as well, to ensure that you're protecting students from all of your students, including the person talking, as well as to almost help then provide them with a reframe, and to say, okay, you may think this about a particular group of people. Let's reframe that. Let's think about where that view comes from. Let's talk about the history. Let's talk about the context of this particular situation. And it can really help use these phrases to engage in healthy conversation, and even to give these phrases to students too. So as opposed to students almost engaging in an angry way, in a way that almost fuels their own emotions negatively, you might also give these phrases to students as well, to say, if somebody says something that you disagree with, or something that you feel is offensive, let's talk about it. Let's try and reframe what they're saying, as well as reframe their thinking to a certain extent, so that their views are respectful, are without bias and prejudice. Equally, we always want to call out prejudice and hate. So it's really important to emphasize that in your classroom at the beginning of any lesson or any discussion, as well as at the end. And I always try to end these conversations with a culture of forgiveness, which is that we may get things wrong, and like I've said before, we may not have all the answers, and we may not know what the right thing to say is. But ultimately, we're all here to learn together, and we all want to learn from each other and respect the diversity of thought, the diversity of identities within our classrooms and within our schools, so that everyone feels safe and everybody feels that they belong. So just to end then, as I know I've spoken a lot about, quite generally, about having brave conversations, with some tips and tools on how to navigate these conversations, which range from confronting your own bias, thinking about the halo effect, thinking about the language that we're using with young people, and ensuring that the language that we're using isn't biased, isn't stereotyped, and equally using something like Big Talk to start having these conversations with teachers and students, to start having meaningful conversations in your classrooms. Here are some books and resources which you may find useful. So the two books by I Heard What You Say and Bringing Up Race are excellent in terms of empowering yourselves with the knowledge and information you might need to have difficult conversations in the classroom. The Global Equality Collective and Diverse Educators are great platforms specifically targeted at schools and education, all about education around diversity, equality and inclusion. And just referencing my podcast, the School Should Be podcast and blog, where I write about how to have brave conversations, more quite specifically about different issues, how to have discussions. And this, going back to Big Talk, I have recorded a podcast with Kalina Silverman on how to have big talk and meaningful conversations in schools specifically. So all of that information is available for you to listen to, and I really hope you found the information in this presentation useful, and I really hope you go on to have great, brave conversations in your classrooms.